Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski and I'll be your host on this adventure. Today we have 5 and 15, which is 5 topics in 15 minutes. But before that, we're going to talk a little bit about impeachment. I know we were all tired of hearing about impeachment. I'm going to dig a little bit into Adam Schiff's motivations. We'll do that here in a bit. I first want to say our podcast is about faith, family and friends, finances, fitness, forte, foundations, fortress, and fun, which is my F system and how I approach life. You can learn more about the F system if you go back to the first episode of the New Book of Daniel podcast, in which I will explain those Fs in a little more detail. You can also learn a little bit more about me in that first podcast. Our show is brought to you by Workplace Excellence, which happens to be my company. I don't have a Patreon account set up yet, so there's no way for you to sponsor the podcast or help support the podcast other than doing a little business with my business. If you want to help support what I'm doing here, go to myworkplaceexcellence.com. myworkplaceexcellence.com. And on that page, you are going to find a link to get a DISC assessment and 2 coaching sessions for only $195. This is a screaming deal. I've been doing DISC assessments for almost 30 years. Been certified in DISC since 2003. Been working with people one-on-one and coaching on DISC for, like I said, almost 30 years. Team training, Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500, and everything down to mom and pops. With DISC assessments, you learn about yourself in 4 very specific areas: how you tend to approach problems, how you like to influence others, how you prefer the pace of your day to go, and how you tend to follow rules and procedures. When I do one-on-one coaching with somebody, this is what I call self-awareness, and it's the foundational aspect for emotional intelligence. And I could tell you, I could probably do an hour-long webinar here just on the value of learning emotional intelligence. And I can tell you story after story after story of clients who've put into practice that which they've learned from working with me on these things, and their productivity and effectiveness goes through the roof. So if this is of interest to you, if you want to establish a little more foundation on emotional intelligence, go to myworkplaceexcellence.com. to just get that DISC assessment and 2 coaching sessions for $195. You pay for that. I will call you, set up an appointment. We will do a conference over the phone or Zoom or Skype or whatever works best for you. We'll go over the results of your assessment, and you're going to learn so much about yourself. Screaming deal. Okay, let's move on to our meat of our session here. I have written back in 25 November, so November 25th of 2019, I wrote an article called Impeachment Motivations Part 1, the Schiff-Ukraine Connection. Because I want to really encourage you to go back and read this article, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it here right now. Because you've seen Adam Schiff in these impeachment proceedings, right? This guy is obviously lying through his teeth. How he can even have a conscience about himself, I just don't believe. Everybody watching him knows he's lying. They know it. Even Nadler knows he's lying. He knows he's lying. Why is he lying? And when I ask the question why, there's always a forward and a backwards connotation to that word. Okay, so why can have a future connotation, like what's the purpose? What do you hope to achieve by lying? And then there's always a backwards focus on it. What caused you to lie? And I think I'm going to, later in the podcast, I'm going to be talking about the forward connotation, the future connotation in my 5 and 15 segment. But in this part, I want to talk about the past. What happened in the past that might be causing Adam Schiff to get all bug-eyed and get up there and lie his butt off. Okay, it's what he's doing. So in this article, and again, uncoverdc.com is where you'll want to go to get this. And you can just go click on the little button in the magnifying glass, the search feature up there in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. You can type in Schiff-Ukraine. You can type in impeachment motivations, and it'll take you to this article. Anyways, I did some digging around and to Schiff's past, and I came across this idea that this fact that he had this guy named Igor Pasternak, a Ukrainian guy who owns a company here in America and lives in California. He held a fundraiser for Schiff in his home that was $1,000 a plate. And if you wanted to be known as a sponsor of that particular event, it was $2,500. Okay, so if you want to go have dinner with Adam Schiff, kick out $2,500 and you can be a sponsor for this, or just $1,000 just to attend and sit in and have Adam Schiff's ear for the night. So, okay, is that enough to get corruption? It didn't flag me. I'm trying to be really intellectually honest with this. I'm thinking, okay, that kind of stuff happens a lot, right? Until I started digging into who Igor Pasternak was or is. He was born in Kazakhstan. He immigrated to Ukraine, where he started a company, and then he moved to America, where he started a company making blimps. Yes, blimps. You know, the Hindenburg blimps, only these are a whole lot safer. And he was, making blimps. He thought this idea was doable. And so he's experimenting with blimps and he's getting progress. Well, then 9/11 happens. And suddenly he goes from being just this guy who makes blimps for people who've got a lot of money into a defense contractor, because these blimps that he's making can stay up for days, weeks, and they can transport stuff at low cost. So there's all sorts of defense application to these blimps. So after 9/11, Pasternak even says, I woke up one morning and suddenly I'm a defense contractor. After that, he starts funneling money into politicians' pockets. How do I know this? If you go to FEC, Federal Election Committee, fec.org, you can search for who gave what money to who, because they have to report it. Anything over $49 has to get reported. So you pull up Igor Pasternak's name and you start finding out who he's donating money to. Well, at first, he's donating to only Democrats. And then around 2006, 2007, he starts donating to Republicans too. But that's kind of beside the point. He starts realizing, this is how I'm going to get my business going. So he's donating $1,000 here, $1,000 there, $2,000 here. Next thing you know, Igor Pasternak has a $50 million grant just to come up with a prototype blimp that the military can use to transport stuff from base to base. $50 million, here you go. Sure worth 1,000 here and 1,000 there, but he obviously rubbed the right shoulders at those dinner parties. Well, along comes this situation in Ukraine, right? And you have Obama, who really doesn't want to do anything. If you go back to that hot mic drop when he's talking to the president, Medvedev, I can never pronounce the guy's name, Medvedev, totally blowing that. Not Putin, how's that? And that hot mic drop where he says, tell Vladimir, this is my last election and I'll have more flexibility after the election. And then the president says, that's all right, I understand, I'll transmit this to Vladimir for you. So we know that Mr. Obama was in bed with Putin, right? And so he's going to help the Ukraine, but what does he do? He basically, as you've heard on the news, he sends blankets, he sends meals. He doesn't send any military things to fight off Russia. Obama's basically saying to Vladimir, I got your back. I'll make it look like I'm going through the motions with Ukraine, but I'm not going to do anything. Well, what happens? Adam Schiff and John Boehner and a bunch of people are saying, hey, we need to send some money to Ukraine to give them finances for military purposes. And of course, Obama's against it, but this all goes through. I would wonder, by the way, who is funding also Schiff's campaigns and John Boehner's campaigns. When you go to George Soros's foundations, you find out that his foundations are donating money to Adam Schiff as well as John Boehner. So I'm going to kind of jump the gun here, but George Soros is this billionaire guy who's really undermining a lot of our elections. And he does not want people to be sniffing around in Ukraine. There are 3 open society offices in the United States. We got how many millions of people here? Look at how big our country is and how many millions, 330 million people living in this country. We have 3 George Soros Open Society Foundation offices here. In Ukraine, little old Ukraine, there are 5 George Soros Open Society Foundation offices. When you look at the corruption trend, and I link to all of this stuff in my article, you look at the corruption trend in Ukraine over the past 20 years, it's been going up and up and up. So am I making accusations? No, I'm asking a lot of questions, though, that people with more chops than me can go and look at. People who are whistleblowers, who are patriot whistleblowers, might want to shine the light on some of this stuff. So up comes, I'm going to find this here. Oh, yes. So he gets a $50 million grant to build a prototype blimp. And then in 2013, he has the fundraiser from Pasternak. Schiff gets that fundraiser. Well, lo and behold, also in 2013, here it is, this press release in Ukraine that since political protests have broke out across Ukraine in late 2013, Pasternak has worked to personally inform and educate members of Congress about the geostrategic importance of Ukraine to European and US security. So Pasternak, who owns this blimp company, is coming to Congress and saying, all this is important, and keep in mind he's funding all this money to people like Schiff and other congressmen, including Kamala Harris, I believe. And well, I'm not going to get off track here. So interestingly enough, Russia is trying to make their move on Ukraine. And Obama comes out and says that giving military aid to Ukraine would be in violation of international law. In other words, he's, like I said, he's in bed with Vladimir. Adam Schiff appears to have some different motivations. So while Obama is finding ways to avoid give money, the House Intelligence Committee voted to give how much? $75 million to Ukraine. This is all in the Telegram. I link all of this stuff in the article. So 6 months later, surprise, surprise, there's a press release from Pasternak's company. And he says, hey, we're going to be partnering with Ukraine, and we're going to make some elevated early warning systems. Elevated early warning systems go in blimps. And so there's this Ukraine Defense Contracting Agency. And then lo and behold, here's a Newsweek article, $50 million grant to Pasternak. And then a 2017 Newsweek article in which Pasternak's company is said to be making M16s. Well, if you may recall, you may have heard some news reports saying that Pasternak was being accused of being an arms dealer. And all that got downplayed, and Pasternak goes, oh, it's such a small percentage of my business, and we sold a couple of guns, whatever. Well, let's just read the Newsweek piece. Ukraine will produce M16s for use by its armed forces, as well as for export. The deal, therefore, is piece of a larger reform to expand Ukraine's defense industry. Joint ventures with foreign partners is a key aspect to revamping Ukraine's defense industry. Aeroscraft, I'm still quoting Newsweek now, Aeroscraft, the American firm partnering with Ukraine's military to produce the M16s, is a California-based aviation company specializing in lighter-than-air aircraft, including airships intended for US military use, also Ukrainian military use. Pasternak, Aerocraft's founder and CEO, was born in the Soviet Kazakhstan and founded his first company in Ukraine. So here's a Newsweek article citing Pasternak that his company is going to be manufacturing M16s for Ukraine. Think about this for a second in terms of friendship, if you will, or at worst case scenario, money laundering. Am I making accusations? Nope. I am saying, please investigate. Because here's Pasternak, who starts funneling money to congressmen. And suddenly he gets a $50 million grant to do a blimp. And then they send this money to Ukraine, and then he gets to build blimps for Ukraine. And then he gets to get armed. He starts building them. What is a blimp dealer, a blimp manufacturer, doing manufacturing M16s? Unless maybe there's people on this side of the pond saying, hey, we're going to recommend you to do this. Just make sure you donate more to our campaigns or hire my friend or whatever. There was also stuff that I wrote about in the next article that I put out on this on money laundering, where the new Ukraine government came out and said that they found huge evidence of money laundering, billions of dollars in money laundering. So there's lots of questions that need to be asked here about the motivation of Adam Schiff. What kind of money is he getting back, if any? Just a question. What other kind of favors might he be getting, if any? Because notice that, yeah, they were all trying to impeach Trump and talk about impeach Trump, and I don't know what, 3-4 different bills come up in the House to impeach Trump. They were talking about impeaching him since the day he was elected. But it wasn't until President Trump, a TV guy who got elected president, got on the phone with the president of Ukraine, a TV guy in Ukraine who got elected president, and started talking about corruption and coming to uncover all the corruption that they knew was going on. It wasn't until then that Adam Schiff got bug-eyed to the point that he fell off the rails and started fabricating all sorts of tales about Donald Trump and making all sorts of wild accusations and holding hearings in his committee that didn't follow any constitutional mandate, where Trump couldn't even have lawyers present and he couldn't call witnesses. If this kind of situation were to have gone to the Senate in any normal court, the judge would have thrown it out instantly because there would have been violations of all the protocols. So this has all been a big fake sham. And we're going to talk more in my next podcast on the next thing, part 2 of the impeachment motivations. So I would suggest, Mr. Lindsey Graham, that you would take a look at some of these allegations that I've just brought up. That maybe they're not even allegations, they're just questions. I think somebody with more horsepower behind them with the ability to take deeper dives into that material should take a look. Senator Graham, don't you think it would be fair for us American taxpayers to know where our money's being spent and who's collecting it? And I'm not even sure that Senator Graham totally has his hands clean. I mean, Senator Graham and Senator McCain were over there in Ukraine getting awards from the honor of Ukraine or some kind of award like that. There's video. You can find that easy. I might even link to it in the show notes. So who knows if even Senator Graham is clean? I hope so. I would hope so. But there's got to be some sort of accountability. We've had people in this country violating laws at high levels, or we call them the deep state. And until there's some kind of punishment, there's going to be no satisfaction in the population. We do not have a country if these crimes that we know occurred don't get investigated. Can you imagine for a minute, I'll wrap with this and then we'll move on to our 5 and 15. Can you imagine for a minute if after being accused of what Trump got accused of with the Ukrainian president, that President Trump deleted 30,000 emails? What would the media do? What would the opposing political party do? What would they do if he took bleach bits to the hard drives of the computers that had the information about those phone calls? What if he took hammers to his cell phones where he was calling people? What would the media be saying and doing then? I would be saying Trump needs to be impeached if Trump had done all of that. Everybody with an intellectual, honest brain would be saying, impeach the president if he had done that after being accused of those things. And yet we have Hillary Clinton, yes, Bill's wife, who did everything that I just listed after she was accused of violating things, having this unsecure server in her home. And she destroyed the hard drive with BleachBit. She deleted 30,000 emails, and she smashed cell phones with hammers. And yet, FBI head Comey says, well, we're not sure she intended to do what she did. I'm sorry, that's a crime. And if Hillary Clinton goes scot-free, then we don't have a free country here. We don't. We don't have a country. We don't have rule by law. She's saying nobody's above the law. Apparently, Hillary is above the law. And something better be done with Hillary Clinton at the legal level of this country. All right. As I said, if you want to help sponsor, help support the podcast, go to myworkplaceexcellence.com and get the DISC assessment and 2 coaching sessions for $195. You're not going to, like I said, you're not going to find a better deal than that. myworkplaceexcellence.com. Check that out. All right, let's move to my 5 and 15. This is where I try to cover 5 topics in 15 minutes. Let's see if I can do it today. All right, the first story comes from USA Today. Jessica Gwynn has an article called George Soros says that Facebook and Zuckerberg are in cahoots with Trump to win the 2020 election. That's right. She says, I think that there is a kind of, I'm sorry, she's quoting Soros in here, where Soros says, I think there's a kind of an informal mutual assistance operation or agreement developing between Trump and Facebook. Facebook will work together to re-elect Trump, and Trump will work to protect Facebook so that this situation cannot be changed. And it makes me very concerned for 2020. This is a quote from George Soros, right? Soros also said that neither Zuckerberg nor Sheryl Sandberg, the company's chief operating officer, should be left in charge of Facebook. Quote, they follow only one guiding principle: maximize profits irrespective of the consequences. This is a Soros quote. Let me read that again because I'm going to highlight this. They follow only one guiding principle: maximize profits irrespective of the consequences. Holy cow, for George Soros to say this, to maximize profits irrespective of the consequences. This is the guy who has been known, who is known as breaking the Bank of England, when he sold the British pound short and he made $1 billion in one day. George Soros, maximizing profits irrespective of consequences. I don't know. I'm going to look up George Soros in the dictionary, and I'm going to look up his name, and the only thing that's going to show up is the word pure hypocrisy. 100% pure hypocrisy. This guy has done nothing his entire life but maximize profits irrespective of consequences. So this is the total pot calling the kettle black. This guy is so depraved. And here's the really sad part. He has come to grips and to accept and even value his own depravity. He exploits loopholes. I have more coming out on George Soros. This guy exploits loopholes and brags about it and tells you what he's doing while he's doing it. He tells you he's exploiting the loopholes. And what loopholes he's exploiting, because he knows he can legally exploit them. But he doesn't care if he's hurting you, because he's looking at it and saying, hey, you got the loophole, I'm going to exploit it. This is what he says in his interviews. Not those exact words, but I'm talking a 90% paraphrase. Look at his 60 Minutes interview. He says almost the exact same thing. So this is a man who knows that he's depraved. He doesn't believe in God. He's his own God. Even his own employees said he thinks he's God. He knows he operates with depravity. He knows that everybody else on this earth has depravity. And so he just figures, I'm going to be the most depraved that I can be. I'm going to be king of the heap. And so he maximizes his own profits, irrespective of consequences. But here's what causes Soros to say this. We already have heard from Twitter that Twitter is not going to allow political advertising for the 2020 campaigns. I'm going to guess that Jack over at Twitter has heard from George, and George Soros has said, no political ads. Why is that? Well, we need to go to another quote from get this, a Facebook executive, Andrew Bosworth. A couple months back, he posted the quote, was Facebook responsible for getting Donald Trump elected? He says, yes, but he didn't get elected because of Russia or misinformation or Cambridge Analytica. He got elected because he being Donald Trump, ran the single best digital ad campaign I've ever seen from any advertiser. This is a Facebook executive saying that Trump got elected because he ran the best digital ad campaign that he had ever seen. This is a guy who works with digital advertising. That's how Facebook makes its money, digital advertising. And Trump did the best ever. So how do you stop Trump? If you're George Soros and you don't want Trump meddling in Ukraine where all your little dirty dealings are going on, you're trying to take Trump down because you know Trump's trying to drain the swamp. You go to Jack over at Twitter and say, hey, don't allow any Facebooks. I'll make it up to you, Jack. Somehow I'll make it up to you. George just dumped $18 billion into his open society fund. I'm going to guess Jack's getting a little bit there. Just a guess. No proof. I don't have any proof at all. I'm just taking a wild guess. But anyways, I think George Soros here is just trying to goad Facebook into not taking political ads. I think Zuckerberg said, no, I'm not taking I'm not doing you any favors, George Soros, and we're going to be a company who doesn't need your money, and we're going to run like a company. I'm not a big fan of Zuckerberg, but if he did that, hats off to him, and hats off to him for taking political ad money. I would be a little concerned if all of a sudden all the social media organizations stopped taking political ad money, because then I'm really going to dig deep into the FEC to find out where that money is going. Who's collecting money from where? Maybe Zuckerberg knows that what he would be doing would be illegal and didn't want to go to prison for it. Maybe that's something Jack came to terms with. I don't know. I'm just throwing out guesses to consider. That's all I'm doing. Not making any specific allegations. Somebody else should take a look at this. Point number 2 out of our 5 and 15. Yes, the social justice warriors. And this is from westernjournal.com, Jack Davis, author. Here's the headline. Airline cuts ties with chocolate provider over owner's pro-life views. Swiss Airlines will no longer distribute chocolates from Swiss chocolate maker Laderac because of the company leader's support for pro-life, pro-Christian causes. Where have we heard and seen this before? Chick-fil-A. The company's been under attack by LGBTQWERTY groups. According to Swiss Info, they've been also subject to vandalism and calls for boycotts. Vandalism. Keep that. Vandalism. Protest leader Rupan Sivaganasan, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm probably chopping that, sorry Rupan, said, this is the protest leader, says, it was about us as customers, wanting to draw attention to our displeasure at the patent homophobia. All right, so you have displeasure over patent homophobia, so you go do violence, and that's okay? Well, maybe, Rupan, your patent Christophobia, because you're possibly afraid of Christ or Jesus. Well, how would you feel if people came and did vandalism at your place? Not that any Christians would, nor would I even advocate doing it, but how would you feel that that was justified? How do you justify your violence? Besides, let's take a look at the definition of homophobia, right? I looked it up. It's fear, hatred, or mistrust of lesbians and gay men, or a strong dislike or fear of homosexuals, especially to an unreasonable degree, or a fear or dislike or hate of homosexuals. Well, does Laterac hate homosexuals? Well, when you look at Haderach's response to all this, they hire homosexuals. So I can't see them hating homosexuals if they hire homosexuals. In fact, the owner of the company is president of a Swiss branch of Christianity for Today, not Christianity Today, the horrible social justice magazine, a different organization. And his son, Johann, is on the board of the group, who sponsors the annual March for Life in Switzerland. They all support biblical marriage. They oppose abortion. Okay, standard biblical perspectives. And Johann, the son, says, I understand it if people value a woman's right to choose more than an unborn child's right to life. I understand that. Okay, that's your choice. But I also would like people to respect the fact that I can have a different opinion. He says, I fight for unborn life, but because of that, I'm accused of misogyny. I'm not a misogynist. 60% of our managers are women. Hello? And he says, protests are not going to change his position. He says, Laterac is not homophobic. We have homosexuals working for us. I attended a gay networking event because I wanted to hear what the LGBTQWERTY group, that's my own, he didn't say that, I did, has against Laterac. He wanted to hear what does this homosexual gay networking group have against Laterac? And he goes there and to hear their opinion, to hear them out, to listen to both sides of the discussion. He says, we do not have any illegal discrimination. We have zero tolerance for illegal discrimination. I don't know. He says, no single employee has left the company since the wave of criticism has hit. I would like to point out that, you know, you have to listen to both sides of an issue, right? And respect both sides of an issue. Does not call for violence against somebody because you disagree with them. You look at what the group that calls themselves Antifa, anti-fascist. They cause all sorts of violence and break store windows against people that they disagree with. That's the fascism. I don't call them Antifa anymore because they're not anti-fascist. They are fascist. They're anti-patriotic. They're anti-pa. Maybe we should do that one. Hashtag anti-pa. All right. Point number 3 in my 5 and 15. Coalition. This is from amgreatness.com. Deborah Hine, author. Coalition of left-wing groups to hold nationwide reject the cover-up protests on Wednesday. So what's going to happen, right? We're going to have the impeachment vote tomorrow on Wednesday, and they're not going to be able to pull 2/3 of the Senate, so Trump's going to get acquitted. So what are they going to do on Wednesday? This coalition of left-wing groups is going to have reject the cover-up protests. A coalition of left-wing nonprofit groups are sponsoring a mass nationwide temper tantrum on Wednesday to protest President Trump's likely acquittal in the Senate of impeachment charges. The Reject the Cover-Up website says Trump and the senators and members of Congress who voted to cover up his crimes will be held accountable to their constituents. And they give a list of these nonprofits, many of which, by the way, are funded, if you look on fec.org, by George Soros's Open Societies Foundation. There is no doubt that the corporate media will give them massive amounts of coverage. So get ready to see plenty of mobs, unhinged and Trump deranged lefties acting out in the streets later this week. I've already gone over the reason that this impeachment even happened. In the first part of this podcast, I talked about how they're covering up crimes. They're covering up money laundering. They're covering up all sorts of crimes overseas. What does it take to give overseas aid and then have your son or your daughter or your friend get hired on by some company and collect a big chunk of that money and bring it back home? Money laundering. We know that Eric, whoever his last name is, was a marionette of Soros. I mean, I linked to emails where George Soros' organization is sending Eric, what's his name, emails. He was a Soros marionette, part of our State Department in this Ukrainian office. This is a cover-up. This is projection. They are covering up themselves. The whole impeachment process is nothing but a cover-up. And so this is just a big projection. All right. Number 4. Elizabeth Warren attacks Christian schools for following biblical sexual morality. Imagine that, a Christian school following biblical sexual morality. And Warren shared a HuffPost article bashing private Christian schools, and she says, states should focus on funding public schools, not private ones, especially ones that maintain anti-LGBTQ plus policies. We must ensure that every kid, especially LGBTQ kids, can get high quality public education. Well, how does that factor in? How does that relate to Christian schools following biblical morality, right? Well, when you dig deeper into the article, you see that these people were donating money to these Christian private schools, and they were getting tax credits for it. Tax credits for funding a private Christian school. How that happens, I don't know, but apparently Montana has this law. So follow the money, right? The left is upset that people who are donating money to Christian schools are getting tax credits, meaning the taxes don't stay with the state. Money then that can't be used to fund public schools, what my wife politely calls Christian, she calls public schools, the word just escaped me. She calls public schools liberal indoctrination camps. Thank you. That's my wife's term for them. So there, and you know, we homeschooled our daughter. And there's this whole thing out there. You look at homeschooling organizations that will warn you, do not take any money from government agencies to pay for your homeschooling. Because as soon as the government gives you, even tax breaks, as soon as they start giving you a tax break or even a dime, they can take authority over what you teach. And I'm not kidding. There's a video that was made about 12 years ago called The Trojan Horse. And I tell homeschooling parents, do not take that free laptop that the government's going to give you for homeschooling. Because as soon as you take that, all of a sudden they can tell you what you can and can't teach. Okay. Is it expensive to homeschool? You know what? My wife spent maybe $200 a year on curriculum throughout my daughter's first entire 7 years of schooling, $200 a year for curriculum. And then junior high got a little more expensive. We had to buy a microscope. We dropped a couple $100 on a microscope. And so high school got a little more expensive, but never more than $500 a year to pay for a curriculum to homeschool my daughter. And actually we homeschooled my niece and nephew too. That was for all 3 kids. So you don't have to take money from the state for this. People, I hear these millennial homeschoolers going, oh, but they're going to give me this free stuff and $900 a year or $800, and I could use that money. It's like, yeah. And as soon as you take that, you can't teach what you want to teach. They're going to restrict you. All right. Number 5. We'll wrap up with this. Tom Steyer running for president, right? This is from Breitbart. Tom Steyer. This is Pam Key writing. Tom Steyer's in Iowa. Quote, Trump is a racist and he hates most Americans. I need to read you this quote because this is unbelievable. At a campaign stop in Coralville, Iowa on Sunday, Tom Steyer called President Trump a racist who hates most Americans. And I need to read this to you. He quotes Trump saying something, then he says, just like Adam Schiff. He pulls a total Schiff here. He says, let me just interrupt for you, interpret for you what Trump really meant to say. He meant to say, I'm a criminal, and I think we can agree on that. And I despise 80% of you, and you despise me. If I came to Iowa City, you would not let me in the front door of your house. And you would never let me sit down to eat dinner with you and your family. It's true. But you are all going to vote for me because the Democrats are a bunch of socialists. They don't understand job creation or growth or prosperity. So even though you hate me, you have to vote for me. So that's his unquote of Trump. And then Steyer says, This is the honest to God campaign because every single one of those things I said is true. He's a racist. This is Steyer talking about Trump. He's a racist. He hates most Americans, but he's going to run on the economy, and we're going to have to beat him on the economy, and I can do that. Couple of things here, Mr. Steyer, Senator Steyer. No, you can't do that. You don't have the policies that Trump does, okay? Your policies will not do what Trump is doing for the economy. Second, Mr. Steyer, you're a liar. Yeah, I just called you a liar, and I don't mind calling you a liar because you just lied. Because what I just read that you said is nothing but lies. So if you think that lying is what it takes to become elected president, I feel very, very sorry for you. That is what the deep state has been doing for decades, lying to the American people. We finally got someone in here who says, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do. When he got elected, he told his staff, go back to all my campaign speeches and figure out, write down everything that I promised and give me that list because I want to make sure we do all those things. What president does that? What president has done that? Trump has done that. All right. Once again, I went over my 5 and 15 by 5 minutes. That's all right. I think that we are looking for a very contentious 2020 election season. You are going to have the left screaming, it's been a cover-up, it's been a cover-up. Everybody who knows better needs to say, no, what's really being covered up is the money laundering and the corruption. That's what the impeachment was all about, was covering up the money laundering and the corruption. So yeah, okay, maybe we should agree with you. Yeah, it's about a cover-up. It's about a cover-up from people in the House and people in the Senate who were covering up their crimes. That's why they wanted the impeachment. Tell them that. Ask them to present some facts, and then you can give them some facts. And if you want some facts, you can go to uncoverdc.com, pull up these articles that I'm referencing, because I link to everything that I'm talking about. All of the things, the FEC links that shows you all the donations, all that stuff, all the facts are there. You can show them all that stuff and say, how do you argue with this? And they can then they can show you the transcript, and you can show me the crime. Show me where President Trump did a crime. You can give them facts. Agree with them. Yes, there's a cover-up. Here it is. Let me show you. It's impeachment. All right. Thus endeth our show for today. My name is Daniel Bobinski. You've been listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. If you want to let me know how the show is and give me some feedback and maybe some topics to cover in 5 and 15, hit the show notes below. Go down to the comment below. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can hit the subscribe button. We put these things out twice a week. They're not regular yet. We shoot for Tuesday, Thursday, but don't always hit those days. So if you want to find out when I release a podcast, hit the subscribe button, and then you'll get notified for that. Comments below, or send me a comment to newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. That's newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. You can follow me on Twitter, see what I tweet about at newbookofdaniel. It's just straightforward, at newbookofdaniel. And also, if you want to help support the podcast, go to myworkplaceexcellence.com. myworkplaceexcellence.com. Go to Uncover DC to read all my political columns. I put a new column out at least once a week, sometimes twice a week over there. This has been the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski, and we'll catch you on the next show. Have a great day.